You are the official historian of the 617 Squadron Aircrew Association. How long have you been doing that?
The official title came in about 1993 with the 50th anniversary of the Dambusters Raid, and that came about basically because of the media interest and the need to have somebody who could actually field that, not only sort of in terms of historical sense, but also just to sort of ease the load on some of the veterans.
Yeah. So you're in effect a clearinghouse for inquiries to do with the history of the squadron, the things it did, from the media, from members of the public, from relatives, from the Ministry of Defence, and
yes,
no doubt lots of other people too. This is this a unique role? Has any other squadron got its own historian?
Other squadron associations have their own historians, so it's not unique in that respect, but I suppose it is unique in the fact that the 617 Squadron, of course, is probably the most famous squadron and therefore generates probably the greatest interest.
And we've just had the 70th anniversary, and just tell us how busy you've been for that.
I mean, that has really been exceptionally busy, partly because it was realised that this was probably going to be the last major anniversary. Officially, the Ministry of Defence celebrates 25 years, 50 years and 75 years. But of course now with the three remaining survivors from the raid in their 90s, it was realised that this was probably going to be the last chance of getting those at a reunion. And so 70th was singled out for greater attention. As a result, planning started about 6 months ago in order to coordinate various events and also have a degree of media management, shall we say, both in terms of publicising and generating public interest in the commemoration, but also, of course, in terms of managing media requirements and media interest in the surviving veterans, so that they didn't get absolutely swamped in 1 week.
Have you been asked any really crazy questions?
Been lots of unusual questions that I've not expected, and some ranging from the genuine sort of misconceptions about things to one or two that have put forward fantastic theories, shall we say.
Do you want to tell us one?
There was one theory which was that the whole of 617 Squadron had been shadowed, both in terms of aircrew and aircraft, by another squadron practicing for the Dambusters Raid, and this inquirer said that his research had showed this, and then he ended his question by saying, "But I've not found any documentary evidence, can you help me?"
Yes, the world is full of people who've got a theory who expect there to be evidence to be found for it. How did you get involved with this? How did it begin?
It all started really as a schoolboy hobby. Aged about 9 or 10, a teacher lent me a copy of Paul Brickhill's Dambusters. Shortly after that, it was the 25th anniversary of the Dambusters Raid, and I found that one of the original pilots, Bill Townsend, lived just down the road. So, typical schoolboy, I wrote to him, and basically he became a family friend.
And you have read virtually all the records there are to be read about this in the National Archives and the Science Museum and other places.
Well, it's
or is that an over?
I mean,
or do you keep finding things?
That's an interesting theory, because I think, and you'll probably agree also as a historian, that the more you read, the more you find out, the more you realise, the less you know. And you quite often think, well, I must have covered everything on that. And then suddenly, often a case of serendipity, something suddenly emerges, which doesn't necessarily change things, but it always makes you rather circumspect about claiming either that you know it all or that you've read it all.
Yeah, one of the words that I am very wary of in history is definitive.
Yes.
There's no such thing as definitive in history. What do you attribute the mounting public curiosity about 617 in general and the Dambusters Raid in particular? Why is it that something that might well be fading away is in fact getting more prominence in public attention? What goes with this?
I think it's really the fact that it was a unique operation, and the fact that it has all the elements really of a boy's own story. It has a scientist, a sort of backroom boy, who comes up with this seemingly incredible idea of making a bomb that will 4.5 tons of metal that will bounce across a lake, sink alongside a dam which everybody thinks is totally impervious to any weapon, and blow a hole in it. You've got a hand-picked squadron of, as people believe, highly experienced crews operating large aircraft at low level. It's got all the daring do and the press-on spirit of Bomber Command. And also it's very much sort of David and Goliath battle. You've got a very small force of 19 aircraft against the might of the German defences. And of course, at the end of the day, in effect, David wins.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us about your the research you're doing at Huddersfield.
The work that I'm doing at Huddersfield looks not at the operational side of the squadron, but more at the planning and logistics. And it explores the relationship between the high command at air staff level, and within it the Directorate of Bomber Operations, and their relationships with both Bomber Command and Number 5 Group, within which 617 was a part. And it looks very much at the not only the strategy but also the planning process and the way that the squadron's technique evolved, not only in terms of looking at what they actually did, but looking at what they might have done, because there are a lot of operations that were planned and never actually executed.
Things that might have happened.
But they actually influenced what they did do.
Looking at history backwards and at the succession of remarkable inventions by Barnes-Wallis that the squadron deploy, it all looks a very logical progression. But of course, at the time, thinking forwards, it may not be so logical in some ways. And more than that, many people would not think that or imagine what the planning implications would be for something. If you're going to do something in a year's time, the factory capacity, the economic, the diversion of effort from one thing that you could be doing into something else that is purely speculative, all of this has enormous ramifications for how policy was shaped. Yeah.
Well, that's right, because I mean there were several factors, but I mean the way that the squadron was planned, or expected to develop after the Dambusters Raid, relied on Wallis developing his large earthquake weapons, and it was believed that those could have been produced and ready for squadron use by basically Christmas 1943, but in fact they didn't materialise until June 1944. And so it's looking at the way that, given that the weapons weren't available when they thought they were, how was the squadron going to be kept in existence and fruitfully utilised until those weapons became available? Well,
we'll all be reading your thesis with great interest to find out the answer to that. Yes, another question that hasn't yet been answered by historians. Yes, another illustration that history is all about the future and what is new, and not about the past and what is known. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.